Mavs Fans for Life podcast. I am Landon Thomas, joined by my co-host Shahnavaz Makhani. Shahnavaz,
what up?
Exhausted. I'm exhausted after the game last night. Your voice is kind of different. What'd you do last night?
I've been to 2 concerts this week, so I've been yelling and screaming, and my voice is done. And now I got the Texas game today, so I'm just gonna not talk for a week after this.
Are you a coffee? How do you get your energy back in the morning?
See, the thing is, coffee doesn't. I need coffee because I need caffeine. Like I need just the I guess the caffeine, but it doesn't affect me. Like I can have coffee at 10 o'clock at night and go to sleep at 10:30.
Oh heck no!
I just need it because I've drank it, since I was 15. So if I don't have it, I get headaches. So that's kind of why I drink coffee at this point. But energy, for me, it's like just wake up and just go. Really no choice.
Yeah, that's me. I'm not a coffee person. I've only had it twice in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, and it just never obtained to me, but my family loves it. My girlfriend loves it, but I'm just natural energy, so I'm like a zombie all the time. So just my family and my friends and in a relationship, they always just see me as tired or grumpy, as they would say.
Yeah, I used to be a 7-cup a day drinker.
Dang.
Now I'm back to I've cut it back. Now it's 2 or 3, but it used to be pretty bad.
Yeah, you cut it back. That was 2 or 3. Some people are 2 at the most.
2 at the most. Yeah, it's still pretty bad, but it is what it is.
All right, Shahnavaz. So obviously we're doing the Mavs right now. We're exhausted. We need a break, but they don't have time for a break. They have a game tomorrow against the Denver Nuggets, who also need some more wins. I think they're 5-3, but their record really doesn't depict how their team is doing because they're really struggling as well. So this episode we'll talk about Kid's post-game interview, his frustrations. When Kid is frustrated, he lets people know because he's usually the calm, cool, collected, bringing people together. But he's frustrated with how his team is playing. So we'll go into how they are playing with the slow starts, the rebounds at crucial moments, the lack of rebounds at crucial moments, and then we'll talk about the upcoming 4 out of 5 on the road. This is a very pivotal moment. Like I said on the pod last week, I'm breaking down this season in sections, and I'll be writing about that each 10 games in the last 2 games, because it's an 82 game season. We'll just attach it to the last section, and each team has to win at least 6 from just my point of view. And the Mavericks right now are 5-4, and they're playing their 10th game tomorrow against the Nuggets. So Shahnavaz, before we even get to that schedule, let's talk about Kid's frustrations. I mean, he's when he has these moments, it seems like he has 2 of them each season that he's been coaching the Mavs, and they're at pivotal moments, and you really see the team bounce back outside of that disaster season in the middle. But the 2 successful seasons, he's really made a point to get across to his team through the media, and it's worked so far. We'll see how the team responds, but let's just go into what he was saying. The first one, he was talking about the slow starts, and he was just saying for whatever reason we get off to a slow start, which they did again. The Suns had 8 threes at the beginning of the game. It was 36-26 for the first quarter. And he said, it has to be addressed. We've talked about it. Got to be action. Got to be some energy. Somebody got to come with some effing energy. That was the first point. Shahnavaz, slow starts. It happens again. Obviously, we could talk about lineup changes, but Kid said, he is making lineup changes because of injury. So, and it's still getting slow starts. So what's your assessment on the team's slow starts? Because that's been a constant topic on this podcast.
It's definitely a problem. I mean, you look at the last 5 games when the Mavericks have outscored their opponent in the first quarter, they've won the game. It's as simple as that. They beat Orlando and they beat Chicago, and they outscored both of them in the first quarter. And, against the Rockets, Pacers, and Suns, they were outscored. And so it's hard to play catch up in this league. And I think the injuries add a lot to it for the Mavericks, because when you start off the season, you've got your full complement of players. You're still trying to integrate new guys like Clay and Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes, and then PJ goes down. And honestly, I think the loss of Derek Lively is even bigger than that because you're losing a lot on the rebounding edge. We talked last week about Derek Jones Jr. not being here and the advantage he gives you on the defensive and offensive glass as well.
Mm-hmm.
But Lively's your best rebounder. And so not having him in the lineup, PJ especially, I think also that's a tough loss for the Mavericks to swallow because while Najee can kind of fill in that gap a little bit, he's not the rebounder PJ Washington is. Same with Maxi Kleber. Maxi Kleber is also a better rebounder, I would think, in my mind, than Najee Marshall is. So having those three guys out in kind of critical games, you're seeing the Mavericks really get out rebounded. And I think those slow starts, again, we talked about Luka not having training camp. The team's still trying to work through how do all these pieces fit together. But at some point, it comes down to the players. There's only Jason Kidd's got it. He can do what he can, and this is kind of the frustrating thing when you see people on social media calling for Jason Kidd to be fired 9 games into the season because of the slow starts. What else is he supposed to do? If you bring in another coach tomorrow and it's another slow start, you're going to fire him too? This is a coach that's been to the conference finals twice, been to the NBA finals last year. It's just it's ridiculous to continue that narrative of firing Jason Kidd. So I think at some point for him, it's he's doing what he can. What other lineup changes can he make? I'm sure, Derek Lively being inserted into the starting lineup when he's healthy is going to change things, especially from a rebounding perspective, because Daniel Gafford has not been good in that, in that sense. Luka has not been good to start games. I mean, he was great against Orlando and the Mavericks won that, so. But he hasn't been good to start games. Clay struggled last night against Phoenix. It's something that I think the players have to figure out. And look, this is not to absolve Jason Kidd of all blame. There's blame to go around, throughout the roster and the coaching staff. But I would much rather have these problems 9 games into the season than 79 games into the season.
Yeah.
And, there's plenty of time to figure this out. We've seen the Mavericks rebound from slow starts. We've seen them turn things around after December. You asked me last week, when do you start truly evaluating a team? I've still got another couple of weeks before I start looking at okay, here's the key issues, because it's still early. You're 9 games into the season. It's, that's complaining complaining in May about a baseball team when, you're 30 games in, there's 162. Things will turn around, you just have to give it time. Let the players figure it out. And Kyrie even said, after the game, when asked about the Jason Kidd, about his comments, Kyrie said, yeah, we've got to take accountability. He's right. We've got to put this on our shoulders and we have to start strong. That's on us as players to be able to come out and do that. So to have a leader like that, to have a leader like Kyrie to come out and be able to put that on his shoulders. And I'm sure that's going to go around the locker room. And look, the Mavericks don't have any time to waste because you've got a pretty tough stretch coming up here against some really good Western Conference teams. So, they're going to have to put things together pretty quickly, but it's going to be interesting to see tomorrow against Denver how they come out and how they start the game.
Yeah, I honestly agree with Kidd. I mean, like you said, you can criticize Kidd on his rotations, on his adjustments, or his strategy as a whole as a coach, but in totality, when you look at energy, when you look at slow starts, it's on the players. That's something you can't teach. Unless you're in a uniform, you got to start games better. And especially, after last season, how they went to the finals, and now it's behind you. You have expectations. You're not expected to go out and win a championship, but you're expected to win these games, these winnable games. Okay, the Suns are really good, but the Rockets, the Pacers, if you're supposed to be a contender, you're supposed to win these games. And, it's just something that's been a constant issue. It started as a concern, but it's turning into an issue. And if you see it over the next couple games, it is an issue. Like you mentioned, as you go on to the season, it gradually gets bigger of a concern. And, definitely when you talk about lineup changes, because I want to see Kidd make a change, but And I even asked that, but he did talk about there's injuries. You can't even look at the lineups or the rotations because there's injuries.
Yeah.
So you can't see what fits best when players are out. Like you can't see how Lively will look in the lineup if he's out. And and I think that is, to your point, I think that is the move at this point, because at the beginning of the season, it seemed like Daniel Gafford and Lively were neck and neck, where it didn't matter. And you could say, yeah, Gafford should start because you're protecting Lively because he always got in foul trouble when he was starting, and you're protecting him from you just overall, just when you're having a bad start, because Lively is your energy guy. He will get you rebounds, and he gets the ball moving better when he's on offense because he's a better passer. But Gafford, he's consistent. Last year he was consistent across the board. Like he's the safe bet. Lively obviously the more upside, but Gafford was the safe blanket where he could start games and then Lively can come in and play longer. But at this point, it's turned where now Lively is just much better. He has shown it. That's what I like to see, where you show me you're better and you take your spot. And that's why I like when players do that, because Lively's doing that. You said it. He is a better rebounder. He's a better passer, and he has more upside. If he could stay out of foul trouble, go ahead and start him right now. It's time, because the Mavericks are having slow starts, and he is the energy guy. He gets the ball moving, where the short roll, you could pass it to the open three, where you can just go out and play instead of, okay, I got to get Clay a few shots here, make sure I get my spot here. You could just go out and play. And that's what's going on with this team. It seems like they're thinking too much, where, hey, we got to integrate Clay. Because you saw it last game, we got to get him some shots. I think he had 5 shot attempts in the first quarter. Kyrie had 2, and Luka had like 3. It shouldn't be like that. And this is where I go back to kids. So like you said, it's not all players. I think it's like 75% players and 25% kid, because he's the one that wanted the change where everybody touches the ball. And that's where I go back to my podcast last week, where I said, you got to meet in the middle. You can't go cold turkey with that. You got to say, okay, hey, we can't have the ball in Luka, or we can't have the ball in Luka and Kyrie's hand the whole game. But the first quarter, to start the game, we got to have Luka and Kyrie being aggressive. And then in the second and third quarter, we can have Najee take over. We can have PJ take over. We can have these different players take over. And that's where I say kid has to go back to what worked. It's hard to just completely change your strategy. I think it's good to take the ball out of hand of Luka, to just make sure he plays the duration of the season and he's ready for playoffs. Then you can go back to all Luka and Kyrie, but you at the same time, it works. So you got to meet in the middle.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about kind of the struggle with kind of keeping Luka and Kyrie prepared for the playoffs, and to your point, they've got to figure this out, because now you've got a tough stretch where you've got to play Denver, you've got to play Golden State, you've got to play Oklahoma City. Like, you've got 3 Western Conference opponents coming up this week, and those are teams that are not going to be easy to come back from. And maybe it's if you can get up, if you can get a lead in the first quarter. It happened in the Orlando game. Like, when the Mavericks took the lead in the first quarter, they cruised the rest. And look, Orlando's not in the same caliber, especially without Paolo, as some of these teams that the Mavericks are going to face this year or this week. But when you can get that lead in the first quarter, that gives you a little bit more leeway in the second and third quarters to be able to your point, play Najee more, put the ball in Najee's hands more, put the ball in Clay's hands more, et cetera, down the line. So I completely agree. I think they have to kind of look at going back to what worked last year. And because when you have a game like last night, you saw how exhausted Luka was in the fourth quarter. I mean, he's still trying to get his legs under him, but having to pull off that comeback in the second half is a lot more difficult than keeping the lead in the first and just playing your style of basketball throughout the second and third. And sure, maybe you're down 2, maybe you're up 3, but you have that, everyone's kind of got their energy back in the fourth quarter. Everyone's kind of ready to go and ramped up, as opposed to Luka playing the entire second half of a game and guarding Kevin Durant, it's just not a recipe for success.
Yeah, agree. Okay, so his next point, Shahnavaz, was the bench. He talked about the bench. He said our bench stinks right now.
Yes.
He said, as deep as we are, we got to get somebody to effing participate. So obviously, but to provide context to that, he did highlight Najee Marshall, who just had to start the past couple games, because he did say once we're healthy, Najee can be that bench player who successfully plays his role on this team. So he's really talking about everyone outside of Najee, which when you look at it,
right.
Is he lying?
No, that's right. And it's not just Najee, it's Derek Lively. Like Derek Lively was coming
Lively
off the bench.
Too. So those two, outside of those two, is who's he's talking to. He needs somebody to step up. Because Najee's been starting and Lively's been out with injury.
Yeah, and I think you look at when this team is fully healthy, like PJ is kind of your enforcer or your hype guy on, in terms of in the starting lineup, and even Gafford to some extent, and Lively and Najee are your high energy guys off the bench. And now you're missing two of those guys in PJ and Lively, and so you switch things up. And so really off the bench, like who's the guy who's bringing your energy now? You don't have one. You don't have a Spencer Dinwiddie's never been that guy, right? Quentin Grimes hasn't been that guy. Is it Dwight Powell? Like, Omax has struggled. You've tweeted about how poor he's played this year. The Mavericks really don't have any other options at this point. It's kind of, that's what happens when you're injured. We talked about the depth of this team, but it's kind of like, I don't think we expected both. You're essentially missing two starters is what's going on with the Mavs, right? In PJ and Derek Lively. And I know Derek Lively hasn't started, but he plays more minutes than Gafford. He plays the closing of the games. He's essentially a starter, and we expect him to be a starter when he comes back, or at least if not soon thereafter. So really missing two starters, you're trying to keep your head above water, and it's an unfortunate situation where your number one energy guy off the bench in Najee Marshall is now in the starting lineup, and the team is still starting slow. And it's like, it's really a struggle then for the bench. And he's absolutely right. Like somebody off the bench has got to play better. And whether that's Kidd changing his rotations. And I know there's a lot of talk about Kessler Edwards coming in last night. And I think Kidd just had to try something. Like he had to see what would work. Nobody else is really giving him production. What was it, 9 bench points last night?
Yeah,
you got to throw something and see if it sticks. So, whether that's, does he take minutes away from Dinwiddie and go back to Jaden Hardy? Is it giving Quentin Grimes more minutes? I don't think we'll know until this rotation is fully healthy again.
And honestly, I think the way Hardy, and we'll get into Grimes in a little bit, but the way they both have been playing, I think Kidd is just going with the veteran. Yeah, and because Dinwiddie isn't playing great either. He distributes the ball better. And honestly, he's been defending just as good as Grimes. But, at the same time, no one's really standing out, and that's the problem. And like you mentioned, due to injuries, Najee and Lively would be those guys. But, when the whole talk of the offseason and preseason were about how deep this team was. It was the deepest roster in the Luka era, or possibly the Mavs era. So, at the same time, we're not seeing anybody perform off of that bench outside of Najee and Lively, and this is supposed to be the deepest team. Like, Spencer's not playing great. Hardy's not playing great. Grimes, he's just playing average. He had a lot of expectations. Max, we talk about Omax. At some point, you got to show growth. You're a first-round pick. Obviously, some players are developmental where you see it'll take a few years to get it. But, like this is your time to show Kidd that, hey, I want to be part of this nucleus, this young nucleus with Lively and Luka and PJ, moving forward. And Najee, moving forward, because we're all 26 and younger. So, I want to be part of this nucleus. But he's not shown that. And he's not even shown any growth at all in the game. And you just see him dominate I think he's in the Jaden Hardy category.
Yeah.
When they go to G League, they dominate. There's nothing you can do at G League for them to develop because they dominate when they go down there. But when they're up at the NBA, they don't show it consistently. And then Omax, he doesn't show it at all. So it's like, that's a tough spot to be in when you're in between, because now you're on a team that's trying to contend, or right now just trying to get wins, and you don't have time on the court to just slowly get in your rhythm. Like, you have to go show the coach when you step on the court that you are making an impact.
100%. And it's we've talked about it with Hardy, like you mentioned. We've talked about it with Josh Green, in previous years, that you've got to take advantage of the situation. This is a perfect situation for Omax to come in and make an impact, especially when you're down PJ and Lively, two front court guys who, provide you that defensive, essentially your defensive anchors. Maxi's gone, Maxi's out. I mean, we talked about who's next man up. If PJ and Maxi go down, obviously it's Najee, but Max should be getting, 15, 18 minutes a game, as kind of the backup 3, backup 4 in this situation. You're having to play small now because Max just has not performed. He hasn't played well. So if you're a kid, you're trying to win games. Like, what are you supposed to do if you throw Omax into the fire and he's just not playing well? Like, you have to figure out, you have to switch it up. If you have to play small, you have to play small. You really don't have a choice. Like, that's the thing that's so, like, it just bothers me so much sometimes, because it's like, as fans, we can say what we want, but what is the coach supposed to do when he's you've seen Omax play? What has inspired anything to say that's the answer? Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's
and no one's even, and that's the problem. No one's even saying Omax should play more. They're all talking about Grimes. And that's the problem. Like you said, Najee is the backup forward and he's starting now. So like you said, Max should be next in line, playing 15, 18 minutes a game, a first round pick last year, in your second year where you show growth. Because there's a lot of players who did not play last year. A lot of rookies didn't play last year and they're playing this year because they showed growth. And that's what you have to see with Omax, and you're not seeing it. And this is the only time that you would see it. Like, if I'm Omax, Kessler Edwards, who I like, should not be on the court. Like, it should be me. So that's where, and I'm frustrated for him because I really like him. As a person, he's really great. And as a player, he has potential. Like, he should be the next Derrick Jones Jr. If you just see his body, and he's a defensive guy, and he struggles with threes like Derrick Jones Jr. did early in his career. Now look at him. That should be your prototype. And it's not being shown when he's on the court. So I agree with you. Like, if nothing's being shown to me, let me pull him out and let me find somebody, or let me go small ball and play 3 guards.
What else are you supposed to do at this point? Like, you can't, this isn't trial by fire. You're not a lottery team where you're just going to throw out a second-year guy and say, all right, like, go develop, no, you're trying to win a championship, and these are close games. If it was a blowout, like, sure, if the Mavericks were down 30 to Phoenix in the fourth, play Omax the whole fourth quarter and see what you can get out of him, right? But when you're talking about close games that, Mavericks were down, they come back in, it seems like a lot of these losses, Mavericks are right there. Like, they're in it. It's one or two things don't go their way. We can talk about Tony Brothers last night. What atrocious refereeing that was to, first off, miss the push by Royce. He
needs to be studied, man.
The push by Royce O'Neal, and then calling a phantom foul on Daniel Gafford, and it's just unnecessary. I mean, you can't end a game like that. That's just ridiculous. But if you're a kid, like, to me, it's like, what other choice do you have? Obviously, there's a trust factor with Dinwiddie. So I feel like Dinwiddie is obviously going to get the benefit of the doubt, from Jason Kidd. Hardy is not, Hardy played well at the beginning of the year, but we haven't really seen him take advantage of situations either. And I think the same thing with Quentin Grimes. I think that's still a learning process, right? Like, it's still, I think Najee has come in and immediately gained the trust just from to your point, an energy standpoint and his toughness and his physicality. Exactly. He's come in and he's done everything. He's done the dirty work.
And that's supposed to be Grimes. Outside of the shooting, those are the characteristics.
And that's on the players, though, Landon. Like, that's completely, like, the players have to take advantage of the situations. We've talked about it for years. We've talked about it with Hardaway. We've talked about it with Josh Green. We talked about it with Grant Wood. Every player that comes into this organization, we say you've got to seize your opportunity. When it comes, you know what your starting five is. Other than Daniel Gafford, it could be Derek Lively. It's one of those two, right? But starting five is set. The bench guys, you've got to solidify your role. You've got to figure out where do you fit on a championship team. Najee Marshall has done that, right? We've seen guys. There's a reason why Jason Kidd kept playing Maxi Kleber when he's healthy, because Kleber's earned the trust of the coaching staff. Say what you will about Maxi, but before he got injured, he was playing at an extremely high level against the Clippers in the playoffs last year, right? So we've seen players seize their opportunities, and that's what
that's what Kidd has said from his coaching standpoint. He plays players who seize the moment. Like, he always mentioned Derrick Jones Jr. was the last pickup of the team last year, and Dante Exum was the third string guard. He was on the third string to start the season, coming back from overseas.
Both were heavy playoff rotation minutes.
Exactly. And that's what goes back to your point on seizing the moment. And a perfect segue to Quentin Grimes. Jason Kidd was asked about Quentin Grimes. What does he have to do to participate or to play more? And Kidd said he's got to make a shot. He's got to just relax. He understand we're missing layups. He didn't miss he got fouled, but he's talking about previous, just over the course of the season with Quentin Grimes. Understand we're missing layups. We're just doing stupid stuff right now. And that tends to happen during the season. So we're not going to panic over that. But he's not a plus. And then he said the whole bench is not a plus. So when Quentin Grimes, you just talked about it, you got to seize your moment. And, the one thing going back to Josh Green, because Quentin Grimes essentially took Josh Green's role. The one thing about Josh Green is he would do the small things. You would always want him to do the big things, like score and be consistent, but he always did the small things, and that's what Kidd liked about him, is he would always get the tip rebounds, or he would always dive on the floor, or he would always make the hockey pass.
Yeah.
Like, he would do those things that you don't see in stat sheets, kind of like what Powell was great at. And he used his athleticism. And Quentin Grimes, he's more of a shooter and a defender, just like Josh Green. But Josh Green showed flashes every once in a while, and we haven't seen that flash from Quentin Grimes. Obviously, it's tough when he has a leash. Mm-hmm. But like you said, with Kyrie Irving, his points were the biggest thing with role players. You got to understand you're a role player. And you got to seize that moment on being the greatest role player. And that's what we're seeing with Quentin Grimes. We're not seeing him seize that moment. He's trying to fit in instead of being, I'm going to be the best at my role. Whenever I get a shot, whenever I get a pass, I'm taking that shot.
Yeah.
Like, you got to take shots, because he's, like you said, you got to make a shot, but you got to also take them. And he's not taking him when he gets the ball, because he's trying to, fit in the team. Like, hey, I got to get it back to Clay, or I got to get it back to Kyrie. Oh, I got to get it back to Luka. Like, when I get a shot, I'm pulling that thing on the 3-point line. And when I'm on defense, I'm going all out on defense, because I don't know if I'm going to play the rest of the game.
That's his MO. Like, that's who he is. That's what we've seen from him in New York pre-injury. And it's just, I agree. I don't really know what the mentality is from him right now. You probably have a better pulse on that than I do, but I agree with you. I think it seems, for watching him play, it seems passive. He's trying to fit in with the team is a really good point, because I think a lot of players come in here, when you've got guys like Luka and Kyrie and Clay, it's like, get the ball to them, right? And they'll get the ball back to you. But no, when you're getting the ball and you've got an opportunity to take a shot, like, take it. You can't just be taking
one. That's what Najee does.
Yeah, you can't be taking one shot a game. Like, you're shooting 30% from three, or 36% from the field. Like, it's not going to get it done. You're supposed to be the Tim Hardaway Jr. replacement, not the Tim Hardaway Jr. clone. Like, it's that's what you were brought in here to do. And so I think with Quentin Grimes, I think we'll have to it's a wait and see kind of thing, because I think he's also been kind of out of pocket last year or two, right? Playing in Detroit and being injured.
Sure.
And,
yeah.
So it takes time to come back from that. So I think he's going to, I think the Mavericks have to integrate him a little bit more within kind of the flow, because he is a really good defender. And when his shot's on, he can be a knockdown, 3-point shooter. And so I think as the injuries kind of settle themselves out over the next week or so, I think you'll start to see the rotation solidify a little bit more. And I would expect, you take some minutes away from Dinwiddie and hopefully give them to Quinn Grimes. I mean, that's the goal. As you've got some, I don't want to say layup matchups this week, but you've got some easy, in between some of these tough games. You've got San Antonio and Utah, where you should be able to hold a lead, or at least be able to play some of these bench guys a little bit more than your starters. And who knows, a game like against Oklahoma City on Thursday, maybe you need guys off your bench, or Sunday you need guys off your bench to play well, right? Like you're going to need to beat Oklahoma City. So maybe, you kind of have to ramp up to get to that point. And so it's going to be a really interesting week with, again, you've got two really tough games in Denver and Golden State, and then two games that the Mavs should win, against two worse opponents. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of plays out.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue into our last topic, is the schedule. They played the next 4 out of 5 games on the road. Obviously, there were 2 and 3 on this homestand. So this road trip, essentially, because they do play the Spurs at home on Saturday, but they got the Nuggets tomorrow on the road. You know how that is in Denver. They got the Warriors on Tuesday, Clay returning, so that's going to be an emotional game. You would like to see the Mavs win that game for Clay, but that's going to be a very big game, just emotionally and on the court. I mean, the Warriors have done really well. Obviously, they had a cupcake schedule at the beginning of the season. Then they beat Boston, so you can't really say their schedule. And then the Jazz on Thursday, like you said, that's a very pivotal game to just get a win. But Jazz are always just competitive. Even though they lose games, they're competitive with Markkanen and Kessler. The Spurs, as I mentioned, Saturday at home. You know how that is. Wemby's really been struggling, but you never know. He could have a breakout game offensively.
Because he's taking 18 threes a game. It's ridiculous. Just put him in the post. Like, what are you doing?
But also, he's not physical, so that's going to be a tough adjustment, because he needs – honestly, I know this is bad to say, but he needs to watch what Chet does. And I know that's his rival.
That's his –
he can't stand Chet, but he needs to really watch what he does, because Chet's not physical, and he knows how to get his spots on the court, mid-range, low post, threes. He knows how to get his spots. And then the Thunder, speaking of Chet, on Sunday to end this 4 out of 5, and like you said, you made a great point. The Mavericks need to play like the Thunder when it comes to bench, when it comes to role players, because their role players shine in their role, like Wiggins, like Joe, like Caruso, like all those guys.
The other Jalen Williams.
The other Jalen Williams. Like, those guys shine in their role, and you would like to see the Mavericks role players shine in their role. So, Shahnavaz, let's just start with, obviously, not to go into each game, but tomorrow's game is the biggest game. Your next game is always the biggest game. But specifically tomorrow, one, because like I mentioned earlier, the Nuggets have really struggled this season. They're kind of inconsistent, and they have bench problems too. So when you look at this game, and it's in Denver on the road, tough to play, what is most important for this team? Because you just had the frustrated Jason Kidd, who doesn't usually do this. He's trying to make a point to his team, specifically the slow starts, specifically the bench, specifically Quentin Grimes. Show me something. What is most important for you from that you want to see from this Mavericks team tomorrow?
It's a quick start. I mean, they've got to get out and they've got to run. Look, Denver started off the year poor, but they're on a 4-game winning streak, and they beat the Thunder, and they beat, they've beaten the Wolves in the last couple of days. They've had a pretty difficult schedule, and then they've kind of turned things around the last 4 games. But defensively, they've been awful. Like, the Nuggets have been really, really bad defensively. They gave up 119 to the Rockets, 122 to the Thunder, and 122 to the Miami Heat over the last 3 games. So,
and then Gordon's injured, and he's one of your best defenders.
And Aaron Gordon's hurt. We've talked about their lack of depth. Jokic obviously has been on a tear, and this is a game where Dallas, in all honesty, I think they should win. With the injury to, it's going to depend on, I don't know if we know the status of PJ or Derek Lively yet for tomorrow, but even so, I think Aaron Gordon being out kind of negates the PJ injury if he is still out, and Najee should be able to work his way, in that starting lineup, but this is a game, honestly, Dallas should win. You would hope it's going to all come down to how they defend Jokic and can they get off to a quick start. They've got to come out of the gates, hot and be able to maintain a lead, because that Golden State game on Tuesday is going to be super critical. And Clay's looking ahead to that game for sure. So that's, they've got to put this one in the rearview mirror and kind of settle things down and get prepped as they go into San Francisco on Tuesday.
Well, my sections, man, this is the 10th game. And like I said, you want to see a minimum of 6 wins in each section. In this first section, the first 10 games, they're 5-4. So, if you stay 6-4, the last section has 12 games, but if you win at least 6 in each section, you'll have a minimum of 48 games. And when you look at it that way, it's a lot easier to digest the first 9 games of the Mavs. Like, they're 5-4. If they win tomorrow, they'll be okay. And their next 2 games are very important to win. Like, you have to win these games. Just for I want to get into the Nuggets. I mean, you just mentioned all the reasons, and I agree. You have to win that game. And in addition to Kid's comments, like you have to start quick. And you also have to see some life from your bench. So you have to win that game. You have to be able to contain Jokic. If you contain Jokic, you'll be fine. Because they're having injury issues. They're having bench issues like the Mavs. You'll be fine because you still have Luka, Kyrie, and Clay healthy. And, the Warriors, I don't care what happens in the game, you have to win that game for Clay. I mean, that is the biggest sign of respect when your team goes balls to the wall in energy and making shots, all the small details. Coaching staff has to coach their butts off. I mean, you can't lose after what transpired with Clay in that front office. I mean, Clay's a Hall of Fame player, and we already know all the accolades that he's done for that franchise. And the way it ended, and the way they put him to the bench, and honestly, you have to just the family splitting up between Clay and that franchise. You have to win that game for him.
For Clay.
You have to do it for Clay.
How do you choose Jordan Poole over Klay Thompson? Seriously. And then you still ship off Jordan Poole for Chris Paul. Like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, not even that. It's not even Poole. It's Draymond. Draymond ruined that whole franchise.
Yeah, say what you will about Draymond. That dude is the luckiest guy in the NBA being in this situation he's been in his career.
Yeah, I mean, if he started somewhere, we won't even get to that. But how important? I mean, just from you. I mean, just when you're going to, a former team of this magnitude. I mean, this is not Gafford going back to Washington. This is like, a big moment where you're going back to the team you played 13 years and all the accomplishments. When you end like that, what do you think's going in Clay's mind, and how big of a game is that for a player to go to that type of environment where they are going to show love, and he's gonna get emotional. He doesn't show emotions, but inside he's gonna feel that, and you're going against your former best your best friend and Steph Curry.
I think it's going to be incredibly emotional. I think that they've already said they're going to do a tribute, a video for him, and pregame, and so that's going to be
everyone wearing the captain's hats.
Yep, that's going to be really cool. I mean, it's going to 100% be emotional. You spend the majority of your career with one franchise, and as successful as they were, and as successful as he was, it's definitely emotional, and I think he 100% wants to come out and win. I think he wants to come out and have a great game too. And I'm sure I have no doubt in my mind that I think Luka and Kyrie want to do the same thing. And to be honest, I think it helps having a guy like Kyrie who's been in situations like that before, right? Having been in Boston and going back to Cleveland, right? Being in Brooklyn and going back to Boston, being in Dallas and going, I think having a guy in Kyrie who's been through that before is definitely going to help to be able to kind of walk through what those emotions are and, kind of how to circumnavigate, throughout the crowd and things like that. But I think more so than anything, Clay just wants to get a win. And I have no doubt that the Mavericks want to as well. It's a tough task because the Warriors are playing really, really well. I'm actually really surprised the way they've been playing, but they've been playing, really good basketball. So it's going to be interesting to see, but it's going to be a great sight because I think the fan base still loves Clay. I think the organization loves Clay. Did they do him wrong? I think that's people's opinion, but to break up the Splash Brothers is kind of, against the rule book in basketball. And so, it's good for the Mavs because we got Klay Thompson, who has been a really good fit next to Kyrie and Luka. It's definitely going to be emotional. It's going to be a great watch. I just, you hope the Mavs can pull out a win. And I have no doubt that everybody on that team is going to be doing what they can to make sure Klay walks out of there with a victory.
And let me say this about Klay in the starting lineup. I know that people are thinking, hey, Najee's playing so good, and then when PJ comes back, you can have Najee, PJ, and then Lively or Gafford. But let me say this. You can't take him out of the lineup.
No, he's not getting out of the starting lineup.
He's not getting out of the starting lineup. You can't, even if you wanted to, you can't. After all that transpired and you brought him out of the Warriors, he at least has to start the whole season. And then that's not my only point. He has to start because he can shoot. Like you can't have Najee, PJ, and Lively as the other three. You have to have one knockdown shooter. He's your only knockdown purified shooter in that lineup. Obviously, Kyrie is great a shooter. And
Luka's not a spot-up shooter. Luka's kind of an in-rhythm kind of guy. And I think Kyrie's a better, post-dribble shooter than he is a spot-up shooter. And I think he looks for those looks as well. Yeah, Clay's arguably the best spot-up shooter in the history of basketball.
Yeah, catch and shoot. And that's my reason. I mean, there's the only reasonable change has to be Lively and getting back to I think that was in getting just having Najee as your sixth man and then Gafford as your backup big. I mean, eventually in the playoffs you're gonna see like three guys off the bench, or four at the most, but you're gonna have Najee and Gafford or Lively play the most minutes off the bench, and then maybe Maxey or one of these guards, hopefully Grimes, steps up. So, Shahnavaz, what final word? What record do the Mavs have to have? We kind of did this last time. What record does the Mavs? And I'm not. And give me both. What record do the Mavs have to have in its next 5 games? Nuggets, Warriors, Jazz, Spurs, Thunder, and then what do you see the Mavs doing in these next 5 games?
I think they have to have, I think they got to come out with a winning record. You got to go 3-2, I'm going to throw my hat. I was so close last time because I said the Mavericks would lose to the Pacers and beat the Suns. And if it wasn't for Tony Brothers, I think they would have beaten the Suns last night. So I'm going to say the Mavs go 4-1. I'm going to say there's a turnaround coming. I'm going to say I think they're going to lose one of the, either to the Nuggets or the Warriors. I could see that happening. I think they actually, you know what? I think they go back. I think they lose to the Thunder.
Yeah.
Let me go back. I think they lose to the Thunder. I think the first matchup.
So 4-game winning streak coming out.
I think 4-game winning streak. I think they take care of business against Denver. I think the emotions. I think Klay goes off Tuesday night. I think he wants to. I think they're going to put him in a position to do it. And then Utah, San Antonio is, two, should be wins for the Mavs. We'll see. But, and then I think Oklahoma City, I think the first time they play each other is always a struggle because you got to figure out what the matchup is. And both teams are trying to integrate new pieces, and they're the two favorites in the West. And, this is all, let's hope PJ and Derek Lively are back, because if they're not for some of these games, that obviously changes things. But I'm gonna take a leap of faith and say 4-1.
Yeah, I think they have to go 4-1. Yeah, I don't even say 3-2 or 2-3. Like, you have to go 4-1 after the Mavs struggles at the beginning of the season, after a frustrated coach, after expectations are high. I think they're thinking too much at the beginning of games, and then when they just play, it's so good because they're down, and then when they just play, they come right back instantly. Like, you see the potential and the flash of this team, and I think they're just thinking too much at the beginning of the game because they're trying to integrate Clay, and when you just play, things will all work out because they have the talent. Even without PJ and Lively, like, you see them, how they came back with the Suns. Like, you see how they came back with the Rockets, and just the potential of the top three guys. Like, just play. If Clay gets shots in the first quarter or the fourth quarter, just make sure you find them when you're doubled, or just make sure you just play within the offense. And I think they're thinking too much. Like, hey, let's get Clay going early, and then we can get ours. Like, no, just give you what the defense gives you. If Luka starts hot, keep giving them ball. If Kyrie starts hot, keep giving them ball. If Clay hits 2 threes, drive and then find them on the open 3 line. That's just play basketball. And then the coach has to go back to saying, hey, Luka has to start us off. He's the best. Like, to him, to Kid, he's the best player in the world. But at worst, he's top 3 in the world. So, like, you have to get your guy going early. And like you mentioned it, when he gets going early, like the Magic, everything falls into place because the defense is so collapsed on Luka. Then you got Kyrie and Clay, and then you got other guys open. So I think they have to go 4-1 just off of Kid's reaction. And then, like you said, the Denver game, I mean, the first game, they have to bounce back.
Yeah, you got to beat Denver.
You got to beat Denver because after everything that's transpired. And then the Warriors, we already talked about it, Clay's game. You have to win for Clay. And then Jazz and Spurs, those are winnable games based off of talent. Like, you have to win those games. And then I think they'll lose to the Thunder, like you said, because especially not just because of, the Thunder are just how they played this season and how, they have most of their pieces healthy outside of Hartenstein, but just off of last season, the Mavs whooped them in the playoffs. Yeah. I think the Thunder are going to come back for vengeance just because the Mavs shattered their dreams. They were the best team in the West, and there were a lot of good teams. So I think that they'll win off of that, and you'll start a little rivalry going on with the Thunder.
No, I think the Thunder game is going to be that's the one where you're kind of like, I don't know if they can win that. And I didn't even think about kind of the revenge factor from last year. Them coming out and wanting to beat Dallas as badly as Dallas beat them last year. So, those are what, I think you and I both had them at the top 2 in the West. I mean, that's what I think a lot of people expect is, a conference finals preview. And so, that's another game that, even if you lose, like, you want to at least be competitive. You don't want to get blown out in a game like that, against the Thunder. I mean, you want to at least, keep kind of, keep them on their toes, right? Even if they win, have them understand it. Look, it was still close. Like, a couple things fall our way. Like, that outcome could be different. It'll be interesting to see, but, like you said, Dallas has a real opportunity with Aaron Gordon out to beat Denver. Win a game for Clay and then 2 winnable games. There's no reason why they can't be 4-0 going into that matchup, against Oklahoma City next week.
Yeah, I agree. And that'll be good for this team just to get back to expectations and just get back to playing basketball. because if you win those 4 games, then you're 9-4 and you're back in the thick of things of being a contender early in the season. Obviously, it's a long season, but we'll have to point this out to end the podcast. That Warriors game is the first NBA Cup game.
Right. Yeah.
So that's another reason to win. Obviously, there's mixed feelings about the NBA Cup, but it's fun, so you have to win that game. And then after this 4 out of 5 games, the next 2 games, obviously it's a little early to talk about, but the next 2 games after that Thunder game, the Pelicans and the Nuggets again are NBA Cup games.
Okay, so we're getting into that part of the season now. That's awesome.
It seems like okay. Now we got the early games and issues out of the way. Now it's time to win. Now it's time to get back to Mavs basketball because these are pivotal games coming up.
Absolutely.
All right, so thanks everyone for tuning in to the Mavs Fans for Life podcast. Make sure y'all follow us. You see the socials on the screen. And then also appreciate y'all liking and subscribing. Our YouTube channel is constantly growing. We're almost at 6,000 subscribers, and we just started using YouTube a year ago. So it's constantly growing. We appreciate everyone tuning in to the podcast, the highlights, the post-game interviews, and we appreciate y'all on constantly supporting us. So thanks for tuning in. Goodbye, everyone.